In this video, we want to talk about stand your ground law in Pennsylvania. Some states have stand your ground law, some don't. Each one of them is a little idiosyncratic, and they have little idiosyncrasies, and I want to talk about Pennsylvania specifically. So it is separate and distinct from the Castle Doctrine. Castle Doctrine is geolocation based, meaning in your house, around your curtilage, that general area. Whereas stand your ground applies no matter where you are in the state of Pennsylvania, provided that you're allowed to be there. So let's talk about what stand your ground law basically means and what it doesn't mean. There's a lot of myths out there. Let's start with one myth. A lot of people that do not like the law call it the Make My Day law, after Dirty Harry. It doesn't give you permission to kill people for no reason. It is only triggered in a justification type of situation. So again, that is in a situation where under the totality of the circumstances, you have a reasonable belief of imminent fear, and it has to be reasonable, of death, serious bodily injury, kidnapping, or sexual assault. That baseline must exist. Under Pennsylvania law, you have an additional factor that comes into play, and we call that a generalized duty to retreat, as long as you can do so to complete and total safety. What stand your ground law does is it alleviates or gets rid of just that last little bit, the duty to retreat. It doesn't all of a sudden make justification not necessary. You can't just sit there and say, I was afraid that I was going to get hit by a fist in the arm, and say, well, then therefore I drew and I shot him. Stand your ground. Well, no, that's not it, because again, that's not reasonable fear of serious bodily injury, not just bodily injury, serious bodily injury, something that would send you and keep you to the hospital, that type of thing, death, sexual assault, or kidnapping. So the duty to retreat is removed by stand your ground. What stand your ground, in order for it to be triggered, you have to be in a lawful place, a place where you're allowed to be. That basically you have to have clean hands, meaning that you can't be engaged in a crime or provoking this incident to come to fruition, come to be. You have to be in lawful possession of the firearm. You can't be a prohibited person. You can't have an unregistered, not NFA firearm, for example. And that the attacker must display a deadly weapon or what appears to be a deadly weapon, something that is capable of deadly force, whatever that might be. That has to be present. It has to be displayed or reasonably thought to have been. It can be a mistake after the fact, but when you make that critical choice, that critical incident going on, it has to appear reasonably to be so. Justification must apply, like I said in the very beginning. If all of the above are met, you have no duty to retreat. You don't have to take one step backwards. You don't have to run away as fast as you can. You are allowed to execute lethal, deadly force under those circumstances. So some examples of where stand your ground would not apply is if you're trespassing. The common example is you get in a neighbor dispute and you come over on his land and he says, get off my land, and you stand your ground. Well, that's no good. That's going to violate the doctrine of stand your ground. If you're engaged in criminal activity, drug dealing, robbing a bank, that's not what you would do, but I'm saying, for example, someone would do. If you're a prohibited person, you're even under a temporary PFA, or that you are a prohibited person because of some thing in your past, a 302 commitment, a mental health commitment, that would be a good example. Then you can't use stand your ground. You can still use self-defense, but just not stand your ground. And the other one has to do, again, if you have a firearm that isn't allowed, you're not allowed to have. For example, if you have a sawed-off shotgun that's not registered on the NFA, you don't have a Form 4 or Form 1. that would be a problem under stand your ground law. Again, self-defense would still apply, but stand your ground and that generalized duty to retreat would be present.